Once upon a time, in a land of lush green hills and grand palaces, there lived a kind man who had two daughters named Samra and Sara. His first wife had passed away, and the sisters were each other's support. Both were exceptionally beautiful. The older sister, Samra, had golden hair that shimmered in the sunlight and eyes as green as the forests. The younger sister, Sara, had deep black hair adorned with pearls and blue eyes like the depths of the ocean. But their beauty wasn't their only remarkable trait. Samra was also a skilled carpet weaver, known throughout the kingdom. The rug could have been a real masterpiece, especially since Sara was so talented that she could whip up a feast for the whole country just from an egg. Even though their dad was a loving guy, he remarried, and his new wife absolutely hated the girls. This woman filled his head with toxic words, convincing him that the girls were a burden. Eventually, he fell for her manipulation and made a terrible decision. He would leave his daughters in the wilderness. One morning, he called Samra and Sara to go for a walk in the garden under the pretense of it being a nice outing. The sisters, full of joy from spending time with their dad, wore their best silk outfits. Samira chose a bright red dress with beautiful embroidery, while Sara opted for a deep blue dress adorned with tiny beads that sparkled in the sunlight. As they walked behind their dad in the forest, their laughter echoed among the trees. Little did they know, their dad had already dug a deep hole and covered it with a delicate cloth, making it look almost invisible against the ground, right under a grand apple tree. As they climbed up, he called out, "Come closer, my dear daughter. The best apples are right here." Trusting their father completely, Samra and Sara moved forward, and suddenly the ground vanished beneath their feet. It felt like the world was spinning as they found themselves in darkness. The last thing they saw was their father's face peering into the pit. There was sadness in his eyes, but then he turned away and left them there. The pit was deep, its damp walls closing in around them. Sara tightly held onto her sister's arm, her blue dress covered in mud. They were covered in mud, while Samra's bright outfit shimmered gently in the dim light. Days went by and hunger started to weaken them. At first, Sara tried to use her skills to find something to eat, breaking small stones in the hope of uncovering something edible beneath them, but there was nothing there. As despair began to set in, Samra prayed, and miraculously, her hands transformed, one into a shovel and the other into a pickaxe. A new spark of hope ignited, and she started digging into the ground. Her golden hair caked with dirt. Her big, beautiful eyes sparkled with determination. After hours of hard work, Sara, completely exhausted, quietly encouraged her. Finally, Samra's tree-like hands broke through the ground, creating a path. Light poured in, and as soon as they stepped outside, Sara took deep breaths of the fresh air. They found themselves near the royal palace, stepping into its grand courtyard. The smell of horses and fresh grass surrounded them, and seeing the golden almonds and juicy raisins meant for the royal horses made their stomachs grumble with hunger. Reluctantly, Sara grabbed a handful of almonds. She gathered the hay and shared it with her sister. For many nights, they stole just enough to survive. Their once luxurious silk clothes were now tattered, but they still shone in the dim light of the stable. However, it didn't take long for the stable keeper to notice that the horses were getting weaker, so he decided to find out the truth. One night, he hid behind a pile of hay and saw Sara sneaking into the stable. Her shiny black hair glistened in the moonlight as she reached for the feed. The keeper immediately grabbed her wrist and yanked her back. The guard was called, and both sisters were dragged in front of the king, who was a young and majestic ruler dressed in deep red and gold. His sharp gaze softened when he saw Samra, standing proudly in her shimmering but now tattered outfit, and Sara, whose deep blue attire still held a trace of its former elegance. "Who are you, and why were you stealing my horse's feed?" the king asked sternly. Instead of begging for mercy, Samra held her head high and replied confidently, "O mighty one, we weren't driven by greed. Instead of just talking, if you give us a chance, we can prove our worth." The king was intrigued and asked what she could do. Sara promised to weave a carpet that would cover the entire kingdom. She also claimed she could prepare a feast for the whole court with just the shell of an egg. The king was skeptical, but also curious, so he decided to put them to the test. Sara was given the finest materials in the kingdom, and with her skilled hands, she wove a stunning carpet, intertwining gold and silver threads in a way that dazzled everyone. We were gathered together, and the scene was magical. The rivers flowed like silk, and the stars twinkled in the sky. This enchanting fabric seemed to stretch far beyond the palace floor. During this moment, Sara prepared her dish. She cracked an eggshell and with a subtle flick of her fingers presented a feast. Delicious meat, fragrant rice, and warm naan, all delicately arranged in the eggshell. The court was left in awe. The king, well known for his grandeur, rose from his throne and approached her, captivated by her presence. In her eyes, quiet determination was shining through. Moved by her courage and talent, the king proposed to Samra, promising to always respect and value her. Sara was also given a special place in the palace with honor and dignity, and she became the royal chef. Her delicious dishes became famous all over the country. The sisters, who had once been abandoned, now stood right in the middle of the royal palace. Their tattered clothes had transformed into luxurious silk, and where there was once sadness, there was now joy. When their father heard about their rise, he began begging for forgiveness. But Samara, who had a soft heart, had come to realize that not every wound can be healed. With her sister by her side and the entire kingdom before her, Samara commanded with grace. Her golden hair was adorned with jewels, and her large green eyes always kept an eye out for those in need. Sara, dressed in a deep blue royal outfit embellished with pearls, filled the air with the fragrance of her luxurious attire, making sure that no one in their kingdom went hungry, unlike she once had. Thus, the two sisters, who had once been left alone, stood strong together. She became a symbol of courage and dignity, and her name will always be woven into the golden threads of history.